Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Tech Founder Show. It's Tony Zayas here, joined by Andy Helko. Andy, how you doing today?
Fantastic, Tony. It's another great day. I'm outside again, which I can't complain about, but summer's almost over. How are you doing?
Good. Had a good Labor Day weekend. Enjoyed, again, the last bits of summer that we have around these parts. So it's been good. How about you?
Yeah, things are great. So tell me a little bit. I know today's guest, really cool. Been looking through their website and looking through everything. And I think the technology is so cool. So tell us who we're talking to today.
Yeah, we have an interesting one. We've had a number of founders on talking AI, and we have another one here today. We have Alberto Rizzoli. He's the co-founder and CEO at V7, and V7 offers a complete toolkit for creating robust computer vision AI, maintaining state-of-the-art performance at every step. And so with that, I'm going to bring Alberto on. But before we do that, I just wanted to remind everyone we have our upcoming tech throwdown, so you can see the site. For those of you founders out there who have a tech business, if you want to pitch, we'd love to have you apply. Take a look at that page, and you can learn all about it. If not, you guys can just join later this month when we have the event and watch. We're excited about it. We're giving away some cash prizes, some services. It's going to be a lot of fun. So with that, let's go ahead and bring Alberto on. Let me pull that ticker off the screen. Hey, Alberto, how you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, for sure. So another international guest. We've had a few to this point, but you're joining from London today, so that's awesome. So welcome.
All the way from across the pond. And
pond.
Thank you. It's been a nice and warm week here, and it almost feels like almost as nice as where Andy seems to be right now.
Yeah, Andy's got a prime spot there.
Can't complain.
Alberto, I read the description of what V7 does. You mind telling us a little bit more and just elaborating?
Indeed. We are a platform for transforming images into training data, which can then be used to turn itself into artificial intelligences. AI learns by taking training data, the images and memories of the world that it sees around itself, and then turns that into an automatic program that is effectively able to perceive the world much like humans do. On V7, teams can load images or video of, say, a robot picking up apples, or a medical scanner like a CT scanner, or a microscope that is analyzing a specific type of cell under a particular condition. And then humans can go into the platform and then instruct the AI what it should learn in a way that is very graphical, by segmenting out a cell, by creating a bounding box around an apple that needs to be picked up by a robotic arm. This is the process of labeling data for machine learning. And what's special within V7 is that there's already an AI within it that can sort of sidecart with you and label this data with you up until you've created enough that it takes off on its own. When you labeled enough apples on a tree or potential tumors in a CT scan, then it starts to take over and starts to make its own suggestion as to what can be labeled. And that helps teams that are building anything from autonomous cars to robotics to next generation medical devices to effectively get to where they need to be with safe and reliable AI a lot faster, because they have a lot more of this training data to use in machine learning.
That's fascinating stuff. So I wanted to talk a little bit about this concept of vision, this vision AI or computer vision. Do you mind explaining a bit of what that is and how long has this been a thing? Because I find it interesting learning a bit about it, that it goes back quite a bit. And obviously you guys are doing a lot of incredible stuff with it now, but just to hear a little bit of that history for those that are tuning in that may not be familiar.
It goes back almost 80 years. In fact, the name V7 comes from one of the early experiments in computer vision, where some Swedish scientists discovered how the visual cortex works by putting electrodes in the brain of a cat. So the cool stuff that, say, Neuralink is doing, or many other great startups in reading the mind, is also some pretty old technology that is finally finding viability, and so is computer vision. They come from the same branch of the dream of being able to create intelligence that interacts with silicon, or that is based in silicon. So in prodding a cat's brain with electrodes, these Swedish scientists understood that the visual cortex is actually made of layers, and it goes from understanding very primordial features like simple shapes and curves, all the way to things that we could almost consider memories, like the face of the cat's mother or its owner. And this led to some real excitement in potentially using this form of graph-based computing, these neural networks that were just being experimented with a couple of decades later, to model the entire experience of the world. But that fell flat because we didn't have the computational power to do so. So for many decades, we've created fantastic computer vision stuff by using what we now call classical computer vision, which is pretty much the concept of a computer vision engineer using mostly handwritten rules to define what something looks like. If you've ever gone bowling or darts, you may, or watched a tennis match, you may have seen automated detection systems that use classical computer vision to detect things. Also, many of the weapons of war that were created to understand, say, the trajectory of something or heat-seeking missiles were programmed by hand by a person. Today, though, this is completely elapsed. And this is the cool thing about the deep learning revolution, that it's moving away from a computer vision engineer having to handcraft these features into simply solving the task a few times and then letting the computer figure out on its own how to program itself to solve it. However, until then, we could get to a whole lot of really great use cases, all the way from recognizing books, recognizing images on the internet. Google image search was using a whole lot of functionalities that were using classical computer visions. It's just that now that we can use these powerful deep neural networks and we have the computing for that, we're now on a rocket ship. There's a lot more things that you can do, including stuff that would take forever, almost literally, to program by hand.
Wow. I really want to talk about like the future of where that goes, but I kind of want to step back and learn about how you got into this. This seems like a big initiative, a big product. How'd you get started? Where did this all come from?
My co-founder and I had a previous startup to B7 called iPoly that was also in the computer vision space, and it was 2015, one of the years in which this was just about to take off. And we created the first engine to run large deep neural networks directly on mobile smartphones. And this was to help blind people recognize objects in real time. So we were using image classifiers. They would wave their phone around, and the phone would speak to them by naming the objects that it would see in its peripheral vision. And this was cool, although accessibility is a really hard market to break into. And we were finding ways of potentially monetizing this technology for good, and in also a way that was monetarily sustainable. And we kept getting lots of inquiries from all kinds of business. It turns out that the things that people really care about in identifying that have some monetary or whatever we define as value behind them are not always on the Oxford English Dictionary. They are a whole variety of objects that matter to you or that matter to your business. Say it's a component of a car engine that you manufacture yourself. It's a specific cell line. It's a kidney, but seen within a CT environment. It's a car, but seen from the camera of a self-driving car from the rearview mirror using a very curved lens. So to create AIs that can work in all of these extremely useful business cases, you needed to create a set of training data for it to ingest and learn. And that's where the idea for V7 came about. We realized that for the world to, we have this vision of creating a world with 2 billion programmers in it, because once AI really is working the way we intended to, anyone who can complete a task online, even drawing something, eventually becomes sort of a programmer of an AI that can code itself. And to get to that point, we needed to make the solving of training data really, really simple. And once that's solved, we believe that the neural network architecture side of things, which is what's getting a lot of value today, will eventually settle into a few paradigms, or even something that also solves itself out. And we envision this future of programming where you say imitate a task, you say scrub your bathtub in front of a robot, and then the robot itself will say, okay, I see how you're scrubbing the bathtub. I probably can do it okay next time. And it does an attempt, and gets there 70% of the way, and then you do it again yourself, and it'll complete on its own. So V7 got started in 2018 in London. Been growing ever since. We have we're now in a period of very rapid growth as we've secured additional funding and are just on the way to what some people call hyper growth phase. It seems like there's a hyper everything in the startup world, but it's a fun time, and especially it's a field that is booming. And it's always good to be somewhere where growth happens passively.
Well, since we talked to so many founders through this show, what did the early stage look like? How did you go from this idea to actually turn it into a product and start to get customers?
Yeah, so this is where it's very fun. When you talk to people in public, especially in public media or whatnot, you're always talking about the successes, but it's really the failures that are kind of the fun and juicy part of running a startup. And we've tried a lot of stuff to understand where AI was eventually going to settle and be used in. And we've explored several verticals, many of which our own customers are now championing and taking to production. We've tried to build automated laboratory systems. We've tried to build automated retail stores that you could just walk in, pick up a product, and walk out at the same time as Amazon Go was developing their first prototype. We've tried to develop a lot of product prototypes that never seen the light of day. Maybe one day we will do like an expose of Simon and Alberto's failed products up until we figured out how V7 should work. And the question that we kept asking ourselves is, after dabbling in a specific space and meeting and interviewing some people that were in that industry, do we want to party with these people, or do we want to have dinner with these people? Is kind of maybe the more appropriate one. And eventually we knew that every technology commoditizes and eventually becomes a little bit boring, but the people and their mission stay interesting for many, many years. And we settled into the space that we're in, with our ideal customer persona being the lead of a machine learning team, because we found them to be fantastic people to talk to, and they're very much like Simon and I. And that kind of gives us this continuous level of energy where every customer that we talk to, we kind of want to keep talking to them in a social context. So yeah, lots of pivots along the way in the early days before we had any money in our pockets. But then I think we found the niche that we truly love, and it takes a lot of effort.
Yeah, and if you don't mind digging into that, it takes a lot of effort. Mm-hmm. Was it an epiphany? Was it just that it came along? Was it strategic? Because I've heard that before too. I think on this show, founders who, they kind of stumbled into that thing that was kind of the right fit, and others, it was strategic. They sat down, they thought about it, they planned, and they executed.
It was several epiphanies, and I think that you need to have the discipline of a strategist, but also the mojo and the drive of a fanatic to really find your correct space. It might vary from person to person, but I am personally someone who is very driven by my drive to do something, and very driven by inspiration at times. It's not enough. You also need to be in a market that works, and you need to be very strategic about, like, is this an industry that will grow? And is this also an industry that has a measurable market size and has customers that we can reach out to? But the other side was in a way, it's a feeling, and it's a feeling of pride in telling people what you do in the space that you're in, and achieving that is a series of epiphanies, and that you try something and you know if it works out. In the super early stages, in which Simon and myself were really just on the whiteboard coming up with ideas, we had this 3-day rule in which we would get really excited about something, And the mistake, we were making the mistake that many technical founders do in the early days, which is start with the technology and then find a problem to solve it for. And we'd find these problems, we're really excited about them. And then 3 days later, it's almost magical, the 72-hour cycle, you stop being excited about them. You're like, you know what? Detecting, I don't know, floodings via satellite imagery, probably not my jam, probably not what would be remembered for. There's someone else out there who can be far more fanatical about it because they're from that space.
I love that statement, and I want to sit on it for a second. Of that, you have an idea, and you have the sense of excitement, and waiting, and giving it the time. I think that nugget of advice for other founders out there is fantastic.
Yeah, I would tell everybody, let it muster. It's almost like you're fermenting ideas in your head. And another thing is develop a lot of hunches, because probably some of the best and most valuable ideas at V7 came out of multi-month or sometimes even multi-year hunches, where you're like, is this really like where the space is going, or could this be solvable? And then suddenly you have an epiphany. So like evolve them and keep them in your head. And V7 technically as a concept in this kind of self-evolving platform for self-evolving AI that starts from the data perspective, from the training data perspective, is something that Simon and myself had an idea for back in 2015. Just at the time we didn't execute on it. Maybe we didn't have as much belief in it. If we had started then, we would be well larger than we are now. But so is life.
So just to go back to that real quick, Alberto, you mentioned the hunches, right? And kind of cataloging them and hanging on to them. What was the process that you went about, you and Simon, to examine those hunches and then like seek out to like, okay, let's validate this to make sure that, that we might be onto something or maybe not. How did you do that? How did you go about that?
The validation part is some of the hardest, because you naively think, this is one reason why a lot of young founders go into B2C, is because they kind of self-validate with themselves. And instead, validating in a B2B company requires picking up the phone a lot, requires embarrassing yourself in front of people that know their stuff and you don't. And we had to do a lot of that. In the medical field, which V7 now operates as a market leader in the AI data space, I've embarrassed myself so many times in front of doctors, and like I'm Italian, and I didn't know I couldn't think of the Italian word for drug when we're talking to pharmaceutical companies in my own country. Very early days, and I was like, oh yeah, the drug, the term is farmaco, but it just wouldn't come to me. You just look like this smug young founder, as many people will experience, and you just have to keep embarrassing yourself, pick up the phone and talk to people, and eventually you'll find someone who is extremely knowledgeable and patient that will tell you the lay of the land and discourage you to get into that field. And that's when you know there's something out there, because it means that the field is full of problems and full of things to solve. So we started by looking into problems, in fact, in the healthcare and life sciences side of things. And some of these are data points that mean nothing until you contextualize them by talking to someone. But the amount of medical data that the world produces is skyrocketing. And the types of devices that we are creating to collect this data is even larger. Nonetheless, there is still an enormous shortage of insight. There isn't a shortage of people in medical AI, but there's a shortage of insight because there are too many data points and devices for someone to fit in whatever the human version of RAM is in their head. Doctors are fantastic at making a diagnosis when they meet the patient, but then collecting the whole patient journey into a system that can then present it in a way that it contains suggestions to a human is truly valuable. And if you just ask an oncologist what the path is for someone who is going through cancer therapy, it's more stuff and more information points that any single person can remember for one patient alone, let alone a whole hospital's worth. So that is one of the few areas in which you realize that the world of data needs a giant compressor, needs some orchestrator mind to at least suggest things. Then there's other areas like the self-driving car industry is creating enormous. They're all under pressure to make cars that actually work and drive themselves, and so they have to create more training data. They have to solve New Delhi. They have to solve snowy environments. They have to solve what happens if a refrigerator falls off a truck and lands on the highway. The car is not trained to recognize refrigerators. What do we do? And this extrapolates to all other forms of robotics and automation. So we'll probably see in the next 5 decades evolution of this. Probably 5 decades is the lifespan of this technology, maybe even less. But an evolution of many problems that we'll have to solve before we evolve into whatever comes after artificial intelligence as we know it.
So it sounds like in the beginning that, I mean, there's a lot of different directions you could have gone. And we always talk about how do you narrow down and create focus and reduce some of the noise. For you guys, how did you, that's part of that epiphany and, what direction, but how did you keep your head straight of all the different ideas and directions you could go to say, this is where we really need to focus?
Yeah. V7 as a SaaS platform, and like many SaaS platforms, is one level upstream than a specific vertical case. So in the world of e-commerce, we would be a Stripe, where we're an essential component of many businesses that need to execute within a vertical that they well and truly love. Stripe could easily build an e-commerce platform that sells anything, but obviously they why would they? They're very good at creating this payment infrastructure for every internet company. And similarly, we create the training data infrastructure for several AI companies that are all building their own device. And the need is as simple as you talk to, in a field like us, which is full of newly emerging startups, you can talk to 10 and they will all be building something internally as a tool that is common across them, and that's a $1 billion SaaS opportunity. And every AI team is building a labeling, or was building. Now they're mostly buying a labeling tool to get their raw data, just a bunch of images, into label data, a bunch of images with demarcations on what's interesting in the picture. And it's sometimes as simple as that. If you want to be in an emerging field, talk to the startup founder and ask them what their internal tools that they're building look like.
So we did have a question that came in, what's the number one thing now that you wish you would have known when you started?
There's many. Let me settle into one. And I always struggle with number one questions because it makes me think like, I should say something very insightful now. Mm-hmm. I will probably just pick one of the first things that come to mind, which is how good humans are doing certain things. V7 is a platform that tries to champion AI for the use of creating training data. And we've done some amazing work in there. But I feel like if early on in the days, we had a much bigger avenue to humans in the loop before turning things into neural networks that automate your task, then we would have probably gained sort of 6 months on runway. And this is something that many automation companies realize. It's sometimes actually the difference between AI companies that get a lot of funding and succeed and the ones that die, is that some of them are very scrappy and they will use humans to solve a task and call it AI, and they'll use one component of AI in it. And as sneaky as it sounds, the AI will come. It's almost inevitable that many of these tasks will be solved. And so what you're actually doing is you're creating great market validation with something that is already an AI that is already pre-built and also pre-trained by education systems. So yeah, that's one thing that comes to mind.
Yeah, it's great. You can, fake AI company by just having people and calling them AI, right?
You'd be surprised.
So, and I think that's, you mentioned what's going to happen over the next 5 decades. AI is a big topic. I mean, I think some people don't even understand it. Can you tell me a little bit about, like, what are the big innovations happening generally in the industry now, and where do you see it going in the next couple of years that we're all going to be like, wow, this is happening?
Yeah. I think that, in the space that both of us are in SaaS, it's one of the more exciting fields because it's AI is creating this third branch of software. I believe we have backends and front ends, and now there's this new data layer that is emerging. Where previously you were creating data warehouses and creating kind of a database for a company, but the decision making on how to use that data was still left to humans. Whereas now it's left to autonomous systems that can, with one eye, look at the entire data that a giant enterprise might have, and then extrapolate things from it. And I think that sounds both boring and incredibly exciting at the same time, because it's like you're taking the data from big enterprises and seeing what gives, but it actually will have an enormous impact on, like, some of the more boring uses of AI will have an enormous impact on the world economy in ways that we don't foresee, because we humans have this very simple IO. We have 2 eyes and 10 digits, some of us. And this really slows down operating a business if this is all the input and output that you have. Whereas I think there will be many more tools for running segments of a business autonomously, even just gently steering them, that simply take data and then take a broader knowledge of the world and the industry that you're in and make certain suggestions, recommendations, steer things one way or another. Then there's all the cool stuff, which is all the things that were absolutely impossible before, like self-driving cars that are now doable with artificial intelligence. And there's cases emerging every day. I think that even though AI is still very much in buzz, we still have seen a very small number of kind of AI first companies being born. And we will see many more of them. There's an opportunity for using AI in almost everything in this room. And this is something that almost every founder in a specific industry will tell you. But for AI, it is true. But simple things like this cup was manufactured by a fire kiln. The downtime of forge costs several tens of thousands of dollars a day, or maybe even an hour. You can prevent it by having a camera or an inspection system that is automated, and the only way to actually have that is by using deep learning, by showing it what a breakdown might look like once, so it doesn't happen again, or the onsets of that. I think there's a kind of a new era of software with this data-driven side of it, and then a new series of companies that automate small tasks in the world. And this will create this compounding effect in which you can run a business with far less attention given to micromanagement and far more to macro.
I have a feeling it's going to be along the lines of what you just shared there, Alberto. But I would like to ask, you mentioned a little bit earlier that human beings are really great at doing some things, and that's an observation that you've gained in your role. How do you see AI impacting how humans work, and perhaps evolving the way where humans spend their time and focus?
Yeah, there's a big shift that technology is creating in automating tasks, and we've had the Industrial Revolution, and I think we can learn a lot from there. And now that we're in a new Industrial Revolution, if you will, or informational revolution, we should look out for creating the social fabric that enables simple tasks to be automated, sometimes even very complex tasks like legal or medical ones, while still preserving the concept of purpose in people. And I don't mean jobs, because this is something that is in flux nowadays as well, as there's far more independent workers than ever with the internet, and especially of the millennial generation, anything after that, far more people that just work for themselves producing content. And it's a concept of creating purpose. And I think that we will eventually settle that in a paradigm where AI will be very good at creating and automating tasks that are repeatable, and then it will become a tool for creating things that are new. And each person will have these set of tools to create something that is new and wonderful. For example, GANs for creating new forms of art. And you can have this paintbrush that can paint something that looks like a specific style, or we will eventually have forms of Photoshop where you could type in, I want a blue chair on the bottom left of this picture of a living room, and it can superimpose a perfect version of that, and will unleash this level of creativity. There's a dilemma, of course, into what the future of humans look like if AI can become very good at automating a whole lot of tasks and doing it on its own. And the answer of what society might look like is going to be for us to define. What we do know is that it is going to happen, because even if I were to disappear into a cloud of dust in a few seconds, the pace of progress of technology is something that humans have always been pursuing and will continue to do so. And the Pandora's box is open on this technology. So it's going to be what does work look like when we have robotics that can do a whole lot of varied tasks? And I think it's going to be, I think we're going to find out that there's a lot more work for us to do on this planet than we first envisioned. And that in many cases, our jobs are simply what's keeping society from collapsing to a large degree. And then a lot more of us are creating, more benefits for society and growing it. And there will be a lot more of the fulfilled, society from collapsing maintenance of our world, making sure that, we survive, we're healthy, we have food, and then work on things that are a lot more kind of higher on the hierarchy of needs. Now, I appreciate that I'm saying this from a privileged position, living in central London and all of that. I do know that, like almost every industry ahead of us, there are big challenges once there are big technologies that can really move mountains in our horizon.
Yeah, and something that comes to my mind, and it doesn't, I don't know if it applies directly to you, but I talked to a founder who had developed a really amazing, facial recognition software. It was better than what else was out there. So I'm kind of thinking of what are the fears of privacy, of, data protection, and these other things that go into technologies like yours, like this, that are, scanning all types of systems and pulling in data, and that we may not even understand what really is being categorized out there and how it's being categorized.
Yeah. I'm glad you asked. We have a stance against using this technology, using AI in a number of fields. One of them is face recognition for the purpose of tracking or monitoring someone. Any form of racial discrimination, even if it's in the onset of diversity, because you can really twist a story however you want. So, detecting if someone's walking in a store, what background they have is, I think should be purposeless, and, human intellect should be used for other purposes primarily. And then anything that's made to harm people or in many cases, live animals that shouldn't be harmed. These are topics that we need to sit down and discuss with each customer before we accept them. We generally have a stance of no towards. And this is because we can. There's plenty of business for us to go around, but it doesn't mean that it won't happen. It will. And there will be, and there have already been several, like with all technology, there have been several deaths that have been caused by AI, that have been forms of surveillance that have been enabled by AI, forms of human tracking in ways that the human did not give consent or would not want to give consent. And part of this is the savior of it for us as a societal fabric for this will in part come from founders that speak out and that will say, like, we shouldn't use technology for this. But I will not change the opinion of people in other communities where they believe that this is okay to do. Instead, it is the immune system of a country and a group of people that will need to react negatively towards the use of technologies to do potentially this type of harm. It's like the creators of the Manhattan Project couldn't stop what happened with it. The creators of any form of very powerful technology, the creators of self-driving cars, will not be able to stop that technology leaking into military use cases, where humans out of the way also means more impulsive use of tech. And so it's going to really be bringing this conversation to the world, making sure that people are aware of the power of this tech, both for good and for negative purposes. Now, I've brought up a whole lot of topics in the introduction of your founder friend who is doing face recognition, which on the other side can save billions of dollars a year to an airport by simply letting people through the gates faster. And every single person that would normally be late to a meeting because they're spending 1 hour at the gate will no longer be. It allows people to unlock their phone a lot faster. Being able to unlock this thing half a second faster monetarily makes an enormous difference to the planet. It's bizarre, but when you're looking at this level of scale, it does make a difference. And this is some of the things that we need to put some of these technology into perspective for, that can be used for really some really good things if they're well controlled.
It's all, so fascinating to think about all the possibilities from that ethical perspective. What is being done within the industry that you're aware of to help provide guidelines and prevent misuse, because that's obviously AI comes up, to someone in the general public, and one of the first things that probably pops up is, it's the damage that it could do. Right? Even though we know there's so much good that can come from it.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where when you mention a lot of technologies that have one clear bad case, it becomes the championing one of it. Another example is genetic engineering. People immediately start thinking of eugenics. They don't start thinking of ending ALS. And that is simply, part of how we formed our communication forms. And please, I'm gonna do a quick switch because these are running out of battery. 1, 2, 3. Can you say something?
I can hear you, brother.
Okay.
It's coming in pretty robotic.
Now is it better?
I'm going to mute your mic for a second.
Any better now, or still bad?
There we go. That fixed it.
Is it better?
You're good, yeah.
Okay, sorry to everyone who was listening and got a robotic voice back. Some things of doing things live. So do let me know if at any point I go robotic or I glitch out for a bit of time. There's stuff I can do. I missed the question here. What are the guidelines and what's being done? So one really cool thing that's being done is the whole field of explainable AI is doing okay, but it's growing. And that's basically taking an AI and understanding why it made a specific decision. And there's some great research happening in that space. I could say that there's probably 9 positive, or far more than 9 positive use cases of AI happening, or say talentful founders that are doing something great, and for everyone that is doing something questionable. And for that use of it being questionable, the community has a pretty strong immune system towards negative use of it. And thankfully, it is we're all standing on the shoulders of academic giants here in AI, and all the tech that we're using and we're glorifying is really being researched, built, and maintained by people who have decided to sometimes selflessly work for many years on academic challenges that now lead our field. And when you go to an AI academic conference, which now numbers 6,000 people, they used to be only a few hundred, and now they're super oversold. And people will be debating a lot on how to more ethically make use of this tech. And if you look at some of the giants in our field, say OpenAI, for example, has made it very clear that its language models should not be used for a specific number of topics that eventually influence that country in the United States voting habits. Natural language processing is fantastic for so many reasons, but it can be used as a weapon to influence people, to trick people, and so is CV. So I think there's this immune system response from the academic and research community towards companies that are making misuse of this. It can't be stopped everywhere, and I don't have a solution in mind for countries, especially where the individual rights of a person matter less, and therefore the negative use of AI is more doable. There is no remote switch for us to stop something like that from being used, and there is no practical way of doing so. It's going to then be a matter of public policy, and gosh knows if we will have a public policy system that is strong enough to actually stop this misuse of this tech globally. I don't believe so. I think we just need to be very very open to debating it and making sure that individual people have. Am I robotic again? I'm hearing some static. Oh, sorry. So that
okay, yeah.
know what misuse might look like from this tech.
So I'm kind of curious, you and your co-founder, were you technical founders and built the product, or did you, have to bring other people on? How did you actually, create what you have?
Yeah. So Simon is truly a technical founder. He is an undergrad and master's in computer science. He started programming when he was 6 years old, so it doesn't get much more than that. And he started programming in BASIC, so it was pretty hardcore. And he was kind of always the bread and butter of the technical backbone of what we built. I'm far less of a technical founder than him. I wouldn't normally consider myself a technical founder. My degree is in business management. But eventually, when you're enough in a field, especially an emerging field like deep learning, you kind of become one because all the rules are new. But by far less. Without someone like Simon, for example, I don't think we could have built the first version of V7, even if we hired someone new. I think that in some fields it's possible to, well, I don't think so. It's been proven many times again that two non-technical founders can create a great business, but it certainly does help to have someone at least that can build a product from scratch. And I think it's even better when two people build together. So Simon and I would work together on building the early versions of V7. I eventually took over after we started hiring every design aspect of the platform. I'm now handing that over. So I will probably not be writing a single line of code or making a single box on Figma in a few weeks' time, but that's just a natural progression. But until we got to that point, it's a whole lot of work on building the thing.
Yeah, I think I've heard that over and over from people that we've talked to, is having that, key CTO or that technical founder. I mean, at this point, I think it's been the exception, not the rule, that someone doesn't have some sort of technical, person that's part of the founding.
Yeah, I think there's even an adversity into venture capitalists funding your business if you don't have a technical co-founder. which is sad in a way, but betting people need to make bets and they need to follow what's more likely for them. So yeah, I would recommend, if anyone listening is thinking of starting a new business, it's always good. First of all, get a co-founder. There will be days in which you're feeling sick or you can't be bothered, and they're the next best person other than yourself to look for solutions with. And if you aren't technical yourself, if you can't build a product end to end, then someone that can build a product end to end is going to be far more valuable to you than someone that your friend or that is a brilliant marketer. Because if you do, everything will be decision that will be made at that stage will have ramifications for the rest of your company's history. See Facebook being written in PHP.
One of the other things that I've talked to a couple of founders about, and I'm interested in, is the mental, emotional journey of being a founder. And I think a lot of times people don't bring that up or don't share it, but it's not easy. Sometimes you need somebody there to help you. You talked about the co-founder. What's been kind of your mental, emotional journey so far? Yeah.
It's funny because I was just thinking, so the picture that is used for the ad in this podcast, in this webinar episode, was taken before right at the beginning of me starting V7, and 3 years later, I look 20 years older, and I think that's just the natural progression of things. You will. I do quite well under stress, and I think I thrive in it. But if you don't, you will have to learn, and you will have to surround yourself with other founders that you talk to, even in auxiliary industries that have nothing to do with yours, simply to not feel alone, and that you will realize that half of your business success comes from your state and mood, and that's kind of important. That's one other reason for having a co-founder, is that you can kind of support each other. You feel less alone when there's someone else who's sharing the burden of like every friend, because you tell all your friends, you tell your mom, I was like, hey, I'm starting this, and then no one understands what you're doing sometimes, or no one believes that you're doing, and you have this pressure. So that's super important. Find other founder friends, to have regular dinners with them. If you live somewhere that's kind of isolated and like you're starting a company alone, I don't know, move is my best recommendation, or have regular Zoom calls with them or whatnot, but move first. There's reasons why people in the Bay Area are so successful in starting startups, and one of them is that every party that you go to, everyone is running or working as an early employee at a startup, and that just gives you that extra little bit of energy into doing things that differ the good from the extraordinary. And for us, it was a lot like this. It was like seeking support into each other, having other brilliant founder friends that were working on other AI startups or in robotic startups or in things that were completely different in biotech, and meeting them regularly. And there's other things that you can do, like watch Y Combinator talks, even if after you've passed that phase, just to reminisce that there's a whole lot of other people that are embarking on the same boat with you, because the rewards at the other end are so exciting. And eventually things all fall in line, and you might reach a state, which I believe is the one in which I'm in which now I become the emotional support of people that now need to start managing within V7, and feel the pressure, like, holy cow, how am I going to lead this whole department of people in a field that is completely new? And it's like, hey, it worked out. The industry is booming. We just need to keep calm, build a rocket, build whatever we're doing, and keep going.
Alberto, you mentioned a little bit earlier how you're handing off, I think, design. And I would love to hear how your role, as you guys have grown, how your role that you play as co-founder, how has that changed? And where are you at now? What are you spending the majority of your time doing?
Simon and myself are the kind of founders that would continue to build a product up until like we're 500 people if we could. It's very hard for us to lay down the pencil and manage. And I think that makes some of the best managers, or the people that really want to build stuff because they think they're really good at it. And then you have to force them into managing others. And it's a learning process, but I think that it is truly the indicator of like some of the best people in the field because they know what good looks like. So I started by handling everything that had to do with basically the front end of the business, from the design side of the things, the user experience, the marketing, sales, and today, like just even mentioning these names, there's several people in each, and I can fathom being able to do even half of what's being done in each sector. And as you grow, you need to start hiring people that are slightly better than you in each. And that's the tricky thing, is that when you're interviewing them, they might not seem like they are, because you know what great marketing is at your company. You know what great sales look like at your company. So have people that are just wicked smart and that like are very, all of our interview process are about mental flexibility and starting in a brand new scenario and then building up from there, coming up with new ideas to solve a problem. We create these like hypothetical company scenarios in which the interviewer and the interviewee are in the same level playing field. And then spend all of your effort in kind of handing over things to that person, even though you think that like you can do it slightly better, just don't. Because that person will become so much better than you by just fully loving and dedicating themselves to that sector of what's ultimately your business, as in the two of you. And it's a difficult thing to do because you're always doubtful as to like, should I be doing this? Should I be delegating? Start by delegating as soon as your calendar starts looking gross, and that's going to be very soon if you're doing things correctly. And then time 6 weeks, then you'll realize like how did I survive without this? I have no idea.
You mentioned that you were coming from an incubator today. Talk to us about resources. You talked about mentors a little bit, but just maybe dig a little bit more into that. That is a common thread we've heard everywhere. Use mentors. How have you used other tools like accelerators and incubators, or what else has given you that leg up to be successful?
I mean, probably others will have mentioned it, but be greedy and get everything for free when you're small, because SaaS companies will give you free stuff when they know they can't make money out of you. That'll just reduce the anxiety of runway. Just get cloud credits for free, get Stripe for free, get everything for free as much as you can. Perhaps not the best advice to say in a SaaS discussion with other SaaS companies listening, but there's always a chance. Like, give it a try. And in terms of people, we're lucky to have built a board of people that are very supportive and very useful for the company's mission. I'm probably someone who should be reaching out to mentors more than I do. And in our latest funding, we've brought in some truly excellent people to act as angels within the company that have come from the AI academic community. But I think I'm not someone that spends a whole lot of time with mentors, but I will spend a whole lot of time with founders that have exited or that have, I hate asking for advice to these people because I'm generally someone who feels very iffy about bothering people, but in a social context, you eventually start learning so much more from people that have done the journey before you, and that eventually see themselves in you and vice versa. And so it's an easy thing to pick up. So reaching out to other founders, especially those that have completed the journey or are far more ahead of you, is generally some good advice. And then watch out for how you're feeling mentally. A lot of people have burnout. Some people that may join accelerators or incubators get imposter syndrome. Just don't give attention to that stuff. A lot of people do, but realistically, like you have your own story. You're building something completely different than other people. Don't compare yourself to other startups in other fields. Don't compare yourself to people that are making millions in crypto. It's not your story, and it's just not what you're trying to solve. Focus on just yourself and your company, and talk to others about like the shit that they've been going into, rather than like, keep away the ones that are continuously flexing about how well their business is doing and that they're booming, because they're probably not telling you the truth.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
Alberto, we have a few more minutes, but I would love to hear, before we ask our last couple of questions, what's on the horizon for V7 in the next year?
So much stuff. It's a pretty exciting time because we now have so many talented people that have a vision for every little bit of what we do. And so it's almost like I log on to Slack every day, and there's like a new feature that like I haven't even monitored in the beginning. Like, who designed this? Who built this? And that's one of the coolest parts right now. But to keep it brief, we are moving the user experience of the platform to what we believe is the next stage of what training data platforms will look like. And we've started by making a product that's very, very highly technical, and that's going to help the most pro of our users, the ones that like really need a very scalable way of creating training data and managing data sets that are enormous, and then shoving them all into compute to train the models for, say, a self-driving car or a medical scanner. And we now have the capability and bandwidth of creating an experience like that is ever more magical and ever more self-automating. In practical terms, what we'd like to do a year from now is create a framework to solve any task that requires sight and decision making through the V7 platform, even just through the graphical user interface. So that's kind of what the engineering and R&D is putting their heads around, and we'll see it. It's going to feel like a whole new software building experience, I hope, and that'll be ready in the next few months.
Well, that's awesome. Super exciting stuff. I would like to say we usually extend the invite to our founders to come back when you have an exciting update. So with all that's on your plate, we would love to have you back to share more at a point in time. But until then, where can our viewers learn more about V7, follow V7 and you, just to see what you guys are up to and participate in the journey?
So if you're a founder that wants to build a computer vision company, or using computer vision or any form of imagery that needs to be classified in any way, best way to try out our tool, v7labs.com. That's letter V, number 7, labs.com. Just Google V7. And just press the big Get Started button. And that's how you get access. And the Twitter handle is also V7 Labs, as well as LinkedIn. That's where we post some updates. And you can also reach out to me directly via LinkedIn, via Twitter, and DMs. Especially if you're in this field, or if you want to talk about startups or anything like that. And I would absolutely love to come back on the show. Maybe we could do a retrospective. Maybe because they're like, Alberta from September 2021 was so stupid. As it usually is, like every year, I kind of feel like it was such a dumbass a year ago. So hopefully it'll be a continuation.
That's great. So going right off of that, my final question that I always ask is, if you were able to go back in time before you started the business and have coffee with yourself, what advice would you give?
As soon as there's investor interest in your company, spend half of your time, if not more, looking for and hiring incredible people. Because it means you've settled on an incredible idea or product, and you and your co-founder are not enough to turn that vision into reality. So yeah, just find the most incredible people in the world. And when there's fewer of you, ironically, it's easier to hire some fantastic hires than when you're in like the 20 headcount or so, because first of all, you're bogged down by so many people that like finding that unicorn employee becomes a bit harder. And also you're just, on this mission, you just let's scale this up and let's build it. So that's probably it. And if you are kind of in that stage right now, as listening, and just keep, whenever you meet an incredible person that, at a hackathon or whatnot, that's how my co-founder and I met, keep them in the back of your mind. You never know when they might end up working with you.
I think that's fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you both. Thanks for having me. And it was lovely to chat for the past hour.
For sure. Alberto, thank you so much. Alberto Rizzoli from V7. I heard you guys go check out his site and just, see what they're up to. Really fascinating stuff. So thanks again, Alberto. We appreciate your time. This has been outstanding. To everyone tuning in, thank you guys, and we will see you again next time. Take care, everybody.